Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let Loose with Moose. Today I have Andrew, the CMO of Hashflow with me. Hello Andrew, it's so nice to finally meet you. How are you doing?
Good morning, my friend. I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, and I'm super happy to have you on as well. So I kind of know a little bit of a background, right? That you previously, before you got into crypto, you were in the Web2 space. So could we hear a little bit of an introduction of yourself, of kind of what you did in Web2 and then how you got into crypto? So let's hear your origin story, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Andrew Saunders. On CT, I'm at Andrew Saunders. I am the Chief Marketing Officer and now also the Chief Strategy Officer of Hashflow, which we'll get into later. Started my career actually, funny enough, in Hollywood. I worked for a company called Creative Artists Agency, CAA. Where I represented kind of the 1% of Hollywood. And really my role was to kind of build 360 businesses around them. So think kind of startups. It quickly became kind of a bridge, not just to, the Madison Avenues and big brands of the world, but also Silicon Valley. So think like early tech, kind of early big startups and things like that. Was there for a very long time and then went to NBC Universal, which was at the time and still is kind of one of the world's largest media companies, and went in there to basically build kind of an in-house marketing agency for all of the major brands that they work with. Scaled that up to about 60 people very quickly. And then that actually became more profitable than two of the television networks. So that was pretty exciting. Then after that, I went to a company called Tastemade, and the quick backstory there is when I was at CA, I was building Google-backed media companies in partnership with Google, and it was still early days, but at that point they had all kind of scaled and gotten their sea legs. So I went in and became the global head of brand strategy and marketing for Tastemade, which was basically a media company built on social. So we scaled that up to about 300 million monthly active users, which was great. And then because of my non-traditional background, started to build new kind of tech and ad products. And started working with a lot of big brands, one of which was Amazon. And then fast forward, Amazon actually invested in us. And then about 2 weeks later said, we don't typically do this, but how would you feel if we brought you into headquarters? So then after that, I worked at Amazon headquarters. I was based in LA, but worked for Seattle. And then my role was really kind of to help build kind of a future marketing organization. So, I was the global head of entertainment and culture. That was across, all countries, all companies, all businesses of Amazon, which is quite rare. And I was doing everything from, putting our brands into TV, film, music videos, sports, podcasts. And really my role was to kind of help crack the code on a lot of, new marketing and advertising platforms that no one had really ever fully figured out. Do they work? How do we measure them? And so, in partnership with, data scientists and folks like that, really kind of cracked the code on a lot of things. Was there for about 3 years, primarily focused on kind of AI and machine learning, but also, autonomous vehicles and media and things like that. And then, I'll tell you the crypto story in a second, but, then got the bug, realized that I wanted to go into crypto, said to myself, I think it's still early. I've been early in, social, VR, AR, all these things. So I know those timelines fairly well. And said, I want to go into infrastructure. And so looked at kind of all the major players, interviewed with a lot of big names you're probably familiar with, and then became the first CMO of Arbitrum. And then was at Arbitrum for a bit. You're probably familiar with the Arbitrum airdrop, as most are.
Everyone is.
Yeah, everyone is. Yep. And then, as a marketer, like, you have B2B, business to business marketing, and then you have B2C, business to consumer. I think, most marketers would agree B2C tends to be a lot more fun. So after Arbitrum had about, 25 companies, reach out in the first week. Again, a lot of alt ones, layer twos, big names you'd know. But, as a VC myself, kind of have a pretty good understanding of what works and what doesn't. Pretty much all my investments to date have been successful, which is great. And so decided to go to Hashflow, which, I can tell you more about. So, but yeah, I can go down one of two paths. I can either go into it's, more kind of what you're interested in. I can go into how I got the crypto bug, and then I can also get into the Hashflow stuff as well.
Yeah, so let's keep the Hashflow stuff a little bit later, right? Let's hear
Yeah.
about how you got into crypto first, because I'm actually really, really excited to hear how someone from like Amazon decided to jump
Yeah.
into crypto, right? So let's hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the story is, COVID hits. I live in Los Angeles with my family. The lockdown in LA was very aggressive for anyone that's not familiar, and so, needed to figure out how to kind of maintain my mental health. And so I would go on these, 2-hour walks every day. Started listening to podcasts. I'm a pretty, intellectually curious guy. One podcast turned into 10, 10 turned into 100, 100 turned into 1,000. And I think, for anyone that first gets into crypto, especially if you're an intellectually curious person, it's pretty hard not to understand kind of the potential implications of, blockchain technology, decentralized finance, even things like decentralized science. And so just got very, very passionate about it. Then started researching projects, researching founders, researching tokens. My first foray, I was kind of two things. One, I started stacking a little bit of ETH, and then I bought a little bit of Chainlink back in the day, DYOR NFA. But that's kind of where it all began. And then honestly, just continue to go down the rabbit hole. And like most of my career, I'm probably 80-90% self-taught. Just really started to try to learn everything I could in every way I could. And now I would say, that was 2020. Now we're in 2023. Pretty knowledgeable about a lot of different aspects of the space. So yeah.
Awesome. So what year was this? 2020 during lockdown, right? And
Yeah,
you kind of
2020. And
yeah.
and then you asked also too, I think, I'll call this out too, because I think it's interesting. You asked, what made you jump from Web 2 to Web 3?
Mm-hmm.
For me, again, like, looking at myself as an investor, and even startups that I've kind of mentored or advised in the past, I have a pretty good understanding of like where the future is, what's viable, who crosses the border in we call it the mass adoption bell curve, things like that. And I do have a lot of VC friends that come from kind of the traditional VCs, not the native ones. Now I know, actually, funny enough, a lot of the native ones as well. And I started making a lot of phone calls because I, realized it was time to make a jump from Amazon. And they were all investing in the same four sectors. One was climate tech, which, funny enough, I have a lot of experience and I like climate tech, but it is very government impacted, right? So I was like, it just feels a little early for me on that side. Another one was biotech, which as a marketer, not very fun. Think like 30-second pharma ads with 25 seconds of disclaimers. And then, another one was I'm trying to remember real quick, biotech. Oh yeah, another one was cybersecurity, which I've also
Mm-hmm.
worked in cybersecurity for years. But again, as a marketer, most of what you're doing is kind of fear mongering, and I don't love that. And then the last one was kind of blockchain Web3. And so, the more I looked at blockchain and Web3 and realized, this is something that can impact finance and gaming and all these different sectors, it just felt like that was the right place for me. And so that was kind of the origin story as to, why blockchain versus anything else. So I think that maybe reassurance from VCs that I know, that I trust, plus kind of the personal passion, is really what kind of led to that decision. And honestly, I've never been happier. I love working in this industry and for so many different reasons. And I'm glad I made the jump. Yeah.
Man, I'm really curious, right? Like, so when you made the jump, how did your friends, right, or your colleagues react when they heard that news?
So it's interesting, right? You and I were talking about this before the podcast. I mean, there's definitely a different sentiment towards crypto in the US than there is in, Asia and Europe and Africa and other parts of the world. The funny thing is, most folks were actually very excited about it. I think like a lot of my friends at Amazon, and these are very, very smart, people, said things like, man, like I kind of want to make the jump too, or, I love crypto, I love blockchain. Even my father, who's, in his 70s, said to me like, wow, like what a great choice. Like there's so much
Wow.
opportunity. Yeah. It's my parents, I didn't grow up with a ton of money, but my parents have always been just very supportive in terms of like pursue things you're passionate about. And then also like, they really valued education, not even just in a traditional sense, like just education in general, life experience. And so, my father worked in finance, oh my gosh, maybe 40 years ago. But he gets it, like he totally gets it. And, even my uncle, who's funny enough, like a pretty big Bitcoin whale, kind of came out of the woodworks, and he was like, all these guys my age make fun of me. They think I'm crazy. He's like, you're so smart for doing this. And then I talked to him and I said, you're so smart for being a Bitcoin whale. So, you'd be surprised. I really didn't get any backlash. And even on the Hollywood side, a lot of folks, including old clients, reached out and just said, like, you've taught us so much about digital and social and, how to leverage Amazon 360. Like, can you help us understand this stuff? So I think there's more curiosity than FUD, to be honest with you. I think, again, just, traditional media and the government here just creates this perception of, all of this is a joke. And it's really not. I mean, I'm going to put a thread out later today that just talks about like the backgrounds of some of the founders of some of these companies. And I'm not, an anomaly. There's a lot of us from places like Amazon and Microsoft and Google in this industry. I think just, again, the US does a pretty good job of flooding all that. So, so yeah.
Nice. Really looking forward to that thread. And yeah, in fact, there's so many big brains in this space from like super great backgrounds, right? I'm really surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree.
exactly. Yeah, so then my next question to you would then be, since you navigated, right, or worked at a tech giant in Web 2, and then you kind of worked for a bit in, I would call another giant in Web 3, which is Arbitrum, right? And then now in Hashflow. What is the difference working in Web 2 versus Web 3?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, oh my God, there's so many differences. I think, in Web 2, and I'll talk big tech for a second. I mean, you have these massively scaled companies, right? They've already received mass adoption on a local country level. Most of them have already become global, right? So you're just operating at a different scale, right? So if you've ever read, probably not, but like, Ad Age or Adweek or these, marketing articles, they would say things like Amazon, world's largest, media buyer, $6 billion a year. That was my team, right? So, my old team, we were operating on a $6 billion a year, marketing budget, which is enormous, right? And we had, giant data teams, we had our own in-house agency, all these things. So I think like even less than Web 2 to Web 3, but you almost have to think like large, massive global tech company versus startup. And I've worked at startups before. I've been, in-house, I've advised them, but when you're dealing with a startup, I mean, your resources are just so much smaller, right? So I think you have to be really smart about kind of how do you leverage those resources? Where do you allocate them? How do you maximize efficiency? All these things. So I think that's a big one. When I look at kind of crypto versus, let's call it like Web 2 consumer brands like Nikes and Apples that I worked with in the past, there's also just such a fundamental difference in kind of how they operate or I guess maybe how they market. So, in Web 2, you have what's called forced exposure. So you see a TV ad, you see a billboard, you see a print ad in a magazine. I mean, that's really an ad agency's creating that messaging. They're probably doing some research, and then they're forcing you to be exposed to it, right? In crypto, it's much more similar to what I call like D2C. So companies like Casper and Warby Parker and a lot of those folks that I've worked with and invested in the past, where for them, it's really more about like building, fostering, and engaging community. And so, I think in Web3, there's a lot more what I would call kind of inbound marketing. So creating great content, kind of like yourself, putting it out there, hopefully targeting the right people in the right places. So think like crypto Twitter, and then using that to really bring people in. And then once you've brought them in, how do you stoke that flame? How do you continue to create great content? How do you continue to up-level them? How do you turn them into almost like word of mouth, digital marketers and advocates for you? So there's a lot of difference there. The other thing is, I think in this industry, like there's such a huge non-component, which is, obviously very different from Web 2. And I think like where that becomes challenging sometimes is, Web 2 is very reliant on, first-party data. So those lengthy TOSs that no one reads, most of those things are saying we're collecting this, we're collecting that. In crypto, And I can tell you even about Hashflow, like we're really conscious of that stuff, right? Because if someone's a non, it's like they don't want you having that information, and they haven't opted in, right? So like in Web 2, there's a lot of just you opt in and don't realize it. I think in Web 3 and especially at places like Hashflow, we're very conscious of like making sure people opt in, right? And so I think also in Web 3, you're oftentimes very reliant on third-party data, meaning the Nansons of the world or the Arkhams of the world, and can you take their data and use that to draw conclusions or assumptions or strategies? So there's a ton of differences, but I would say like the community nature of Web3 and also just the data piece are probably two of the biggest differences. And then the other thing that I've noticed quite a bit, which this is funny enough, part of the thread I'm putting out later, is just the backgrounds of folks in crypto tend to be very different than what you would find in, Web 2 consumer brands or even like startups 10 years ago. I mean, you have a lot of companies in this industry founded by, researchers and academics and things like that. Whereas, Web 2 tends to be, I came from this, big tech company, I have a track record of success. Now I'm going to start something else and build my own big tech company, right? So, so there's definitely a huge difference there as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Really like your answer, man. And I think one point that really caught my attention was about community fostering, right? You mentioned that about engaging in community. So I know you're a really big believer of that, but why is that so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess there's a couple. I mean, I can give you kind of my personal reason, I can give you my crypto reasons, but on a personal level, like again, as someone that didn't grow up with a lot of financial resources, I part of why I love Web3 so much is I feel like there's just this notion of empowerment here that you just don't get in a lot of other industries, right? Especially in the US. And so I think this idea of like strength in numbers, bringing people together, empowering people as individuals is just such a huge thing, right? And so I think in general, like building community is not just about building traction and usage of your product, but it's also, I think, just moving that notion forward to some extent, right? So it's pretty funny. Like I always say this, but I get, I don't know how many DMs a day from people, and a lot of times it's 20, 22-year-old kids. It could be a construction worker. And I really do reply to every single one and try to reply to every single one as fast as I can, because again, these are all folks that really are looking to like improve themselves and improve their futures and maybe improve, the lives of their families. And so, when I get someone that says, I just don't have the kind of resume you do, my answer to them is it doesn't matter, right? And I can talk a little bit about, how to get into Web3, but I think in general, like I look at Web3 as a little bit of kind of where the future is going. And what I mean by that is I don't personally care where you went to college, and I don't personally care what country you live in, and I don't personally care, what your economic conditions are. Like I really believe that in the future, everyone can be kind of who they want to be, right? And so I think Web3 really brings this to life in a way that I've never really seen before, because so many of these traditional systems are built for the 1% or even more so the 0.01%. And I think like the decentralization of industries and this notion of self-custody and ownership really, can change that. And again, you see what's happening with big TradFi right now. It's like, as much as you want to try to stop this, you can't, right? And so I'm very excited about the future. I'm bullish. I mean, I know obviously sentiment right now is a little down, but I just, as someone that's been early in so many different fields that have become just massive in my career, it's very hard for me to believe that this isn't the future. I think we're just really early,
Awesome. And I really liked how you're really on the ground, right? Even though you're kind of the
Yep.
C-suite, right? The CMO of this or that, and then you're really on the ground and just engaging people, like you mentioned, replying to every single DM, right? I really appreciate and admire you for that, man.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, I the joke that I tell people is like, I've never worked more. And Amazon, I mean, if you know much about Amazon, I mean, I had to do an 8-hour interview there, and I was working a lot. But you really do kind of work 24/7 in crypto, and it's not for everyone. A lot of people, they want that work-life balance. But for me, I just look at it as, what am I doing? I'm making the world a better place. I'm making people's lives better. I mean, after the airdrop, I got messages from people saying things like, I paid off my college tuition. I bought my first computer. I bought my first
Nice.
Mac. And it's like, those are the kinds of messages that make me go, I'm happy to work 24/7, and I'm happy to reply to everyone, because again, like, the reasons that I'm here, I'm seeing the proof points already as early as it is. And so if we can scale this thing, which I think we can as a collective, think about how many people are going to have those types of experiences in their lives, and think about just how much better this world's going to be, right? So, yeah.
Well, then, on the behalf of the folks, please give us more airdrops then.
I mean, I'll give you some alpha. I did a thread about this yesterday, because I think, like, listen, not like, time is money. It really is. Like, I really do kind of try to maximize every minute that I have. And I think a lot of people don't spend their time wisely, right? So I put out this thread yesterday about, like, different places to learn new things and up level. And so, jokingly, to your point, like airdrops, like, you can research airdrops, you can learn strategies beyond just, threads you see on Twitter. I mean, there's a great site called airdrops.io that talks about all the upcoming airdrops. Have companies actually made an announcement? What's the likelihood of it happening? And so again, let's say your liquidity strategy right now, or your growth strategy right now is liquidity for when a bull comes. Like, approach it intelligently, do some research. Don't just go chase, every airdrop that gets mentioned on Twitter, because, some are going to be bigger than others. Some companies are going to be here longer than others, right? So I think, like, this notion of DYOR is so important, and you can really become sophisticated in any aspect you want. You just have to, one, find the right resources, and two, take the time to do it,
Awesome, guys. You heard it first from the man that gave you the best airdrop in 2023.
I love you. You're funny. But I'll go back. Like, you had asked a question, I think, a little bit about, like, how do you make the move from, Web 2 to Web 3 full time? And this is definitely a question I get asked probably more than anything, because, I've now been in the industry for a couple of years. Listen, I'm able to support my family. I'm able to support myself. I have a real job at a real company with, real founders. And what I always say to everybody is, like, start by learning, right? Because, let's just take Amazon, for example. I have brilliant, friends, former colleagues that work at Amazon that don't know anything about blockchain or crypto. And this stuff is very technical, right? So go online and learn. I mean, Binance has Binance Academy. If you want to learn, development, go to Crypto Zombies. But there's, take Udemy classes. There's even a free Coursera class from one of the pioneers of cryptography that's at Stanford that he does twice a year, right? So I always say to folks, like, start by learning. Just learn, in any way you can. And then what I say to people is, like, start small, right? Like, because a lot of times I get this question of, like, my resume is not very impressive, or I just graduated college. Like, that's fine. Start by becoming an active member of someone's community, right? See if you can go from being a community member to a moderator. See if you can go from being a moderator to, an actual community, manager at the company. And then, by the way, like, it doesn't have to be a blue chip. It doesn't have to be, Arbitrum or Solana. It can be a small company no one's ever heard of. And then, this is what I used to tell people that wanted to pivot from different industries, like, pivot your way up, start small. And then once you have that experience, go to maybe a more well-known company or get a higher role somewhere. And then once you're there, just continue to rinse and repeat. Like I'll give you a great story. So when I was at Arbitrum, I hired this guy who reached out to me, and he was a pretty active community member. And, his resume was good, but I had never heard of, any of the crypto companies he had worked at. And then I had an interview with him, because I was like, this guy has, great soft skills. He gets it. He seems to understand crypto. And then, fast forward, I was like, this guy really understands this stuff, right? And so I hired him, and his name's Eli. He was wonderful. He still is wonderful. And then he became, one of our community managers. And then fast forward, airdrop happens, Arbitrum Foundation launches. He's now the global head of community for all of Arbitrum, right? So look at his story as just an example, because you really can go from, working at a tiny project to being like a very, powerful person in the industry very quickly. So I always just say, like, don't get discouraged. And then the other thing that I like to kind of tell folks is, you also have to think about, like, where you're fishing, right? Because if you DM someone on Twitter, like, I'm very responsive, but not a lot of C-suite executives are, right? think about how many messages they're getting, or, same thing on LinkedIn. Hey, I'd love to work for your company. I mean, obviously the easiest thing to do is to find an open role that you're a fit for, because you know that that's an actual job that exists, right? If you know someone there, or you can find someone that works there, that obviously helps. But also there's places, other than these big crypto job lists to look, right? So, Dragonfly, who's one of our VCs, if you just search, Dragonfly crypto jobs, they have a Getro where they basically post all the open roles at all of their investments. So that job board is like 200 roles at any given time all over the world. And I don't think that the average person's looking at that or applying to that. And then that goes to the Dragonfly talent team. And then that goes from them to the project, right? Or, Pantera, same thing. They have a Getro job board of all their investments. When I was at Arbitrum, shout out to Bellman, who's one of the recruiters there. He's a wonderful guy. We created an Arbitrum ecosystem job board, and that was a job board of like every project built on Arbitrum, right? So just go out there again, do your own research, try to find these things. But again, like, go look up every native VC. Maybe they have one of these aggregated job boards. Go look at, large scale projects with big ecosystems. Maybe they have aggregated job boards, and I'll bet you like the amount of people applying through those job boards is a lot less than the amount of people like DMing on Twitter or applying on LinkedIn. So I would just say to folks, like, don't get discouraged. I mean, there's so much opportunity. Companies are struggling to find talent. It's just, you got to connect with them in the right way,
Awesome, man. I think I really like your story, right? I think it's super inspiring and definitely helpful for those who are looking to come into the Web3 space, right? To find a job. And yeah, I like how you mentioned there's a lot of job websites out there, right? Besides LinkedIn, right? For example, the apes from the Blockmates, right? They have the Web3 nomads as well. So definitely lots of avenues. Totally agree with what Andrew mentioned. Slowly try it out, right? Learn what you can, and then try a little bit here and there for free or not for free, right? And if you're into investing, right, start a little bit smaller and then learn as you go along, right? Like I'm consider myself still pretty new to all this, right? So I'm really learning as I go along as well. So I think it's something that works.
You have to. I mean, I think in general, like, you can never stop learning. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they look at my career path and they look at all these big blue chip companies, and then they go, wait, how did you go from Hollywood to, big media? How did you go from big media to tech? It's because I was always learning. I was learning about these things. No one was teaching me on the job, right? And so then when I would go into these interviews, they'd be like, wow, you really understand this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I taught myself, right? I gave myself the missing pieces. I gave myself the qualifications that someone else in my industry wouldn't have had, right? And so I think that's huge. And then the other thing, just going back to the job boards for a second, I think a lot of people, what they do is they go to Google, they search crypto jobs, right? And then there's job boards that pop up. But think about it. How many other people are doing that, right? Versus how many people are going to the Dragonfly job board? Probably a lot less, right? So again, like, be a fish in a big pond where there's not a ton of other fish, versus like, even though some of those job boards might be big ponds, like those ponds are full of fish, right?
Right, exactly. And let's move on to the Hashflow part, right? Before we go into why you decided to join Hashflow, right, after the Arbitrum stint, maybe you could explain a little bit about what Hashflow is to the audience first.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. So Hashflow is a multi-chain DEX. So, for anyone that's not kind of DeFi native, best way to understand that is, you can swap assets on Ethereum, Arbitrum, Polygon, AVAX, all these different blockchains, right? Which part of the benefit there is, you have, even going back to when I was at Arbitrum, you have a lot of native DEXs, right? But I think, like, when I worked at Amazon, what I learned quite a bit about was this notion of customer obsession, right? And what customer obsession means is, think like the customer, think what they want, and really always give them what they want, right? And so the way I look at Hashflow is I go, you might be trading on Ethereum, you might be an L1 trader, right? You can do that here, right? You might have already learned about L2s and see the value of, trading on an Arbitrum for lower gas fees, right? And maybe all the tokens you want are on Arbitrum, right? Well, you can do that on Hashflow. You can trade on Arbitrum, right? Or let's say, for example, you're a lover of AVAX, an alt one to Ethereum, and you want to do your trades on AVAX, you want to stay loyal to AVAX, you can do that, right? BNB chain, same thing on Hashflow. So I think, again, this notion of multi-chain is like, let people, community members, customers, however you want to define them, do what they want to do where they want to do it in one place, right? And so I think that's really it. And then other things I would add are, right now we have what's called an RFQ model, which I'll explain it pretty easily. So a lot of DEXs have what's called an AMM, an AMM model. And what an AMM does is it basically aggregates liquidity, right, via these pools. And so the best way to put it is, let's say you wanted to swap Ethereum to Chainlink, right? When you're on an AMM, the liquidity is coming from people like you and me. And what that means is there's volatility. It means that, for example, you might want to swap, $10,000 worth of Ethereum to Chainlink, and you're thinking you're getting those swaps at a certain price, per token, but that price changes because maybe you and I didn't want to sell our tokens at the same price, right? And there's not $10,000 worth of those tokens at the price you first saw. Another thing that can happen, finance is all about supply and demand, is, you go to buy $10,000 worth of a token, you think you're getting this price. As you're buying, that quantity or a larger quantity, the price just automatically starts to go up, based on supply and demand. And so we call that slippage. But on Hashflow, we have what's called an RFQ model, meaning our liquidity is provided by market makers, right? So like GSR, Wintermute, folks like that. And so what that means is basically when you go to make a swap, you're getting the exact price that you see. Like we always say, what you see is what you get, right? Because I want to swap, again, let's do the example, Ethereum for Chainlink. I see a price quote, which I would say just go to Hashflow into the doc center. There's a very easy to understand diagram, but like you execute that trade at that price, it's guaranteed, right? And it doesn't matter if you're swapping $10, worth of a token. It doesn't matter if you're swapping $1 million worth of a token. If that liquidity is there, you're not going to pay slippage. And the reason why I think this is such a big deal is, what that basically means is when you make that swap, you're keeping more tokens in your own hands, right? And again, like, this whole industry is about empowerment. And so if I can enable you as a DEX to keep more of your own money in your own pocket, like that's really what it's all about, right? And then we also have what's called full MEV protection. I won't get into MEV, but I would say, like, my hack for most folks is go on ChatGPT and type explain MEV to me like I'm 5 years old. It'll give you a great analogy. But again, like with MEV, you have things like sandwich attacks, front running, and really the impact of those things is similar. It's like you get less of your tokens in your own pocket, right? So I think what happens is a lot of times people come to Hashflow, they make a swap, and they go, wait a second, like this price was so much better than a competitor's DEX, or oh wow, I actually ended up keeping more of my tokens, afterwards, or getting more of the new token afterwards, and then they really start to kind of understand it. I would say, like, high level, kind of a couple of things I call out. So we don't have every token, right? So when Pepe comes out or a meme coin comes out, we're relying on these market makers to make those pairs, right? And a lot of times those tokens have extremely high volatility and risk for them, so they may not want to market make them, right? Or liquidity, they may want to provide X amount of liquidity for a pair, but not the same level of liquidity that crowdsourcing does, right? Just so you know, when I came here, I am a trader. I actively trade. I actually made some good trades yesterday, but we have plans for all this stuff. I mean, for me, again, I'll get into kind of why Hashflow, but like, as someone that's invested in successful startup after successful startup, like I know what to look for in a good project. Case in point, Arbitrum has done quite well, since I was there. But I would say, like, long term, I know what I want in a DEX. And it's a wonderful, C-suite here. All of us are on the same page. And so, while we've been building Hashverse, which I know you and I will talk about later, like we've also been working on Hashflow V2, which I really think is going to kind of change the game, because if I can go to a singular place and I can get any token I want with the liquidity I want with, a better price than anywhere else, why would I go anywhere else? Right. So, we can talk about some of that later, but I'm very bullish. Yeah.
Awesome. Super high level explanation of Hashflow in like less than 5 minutes.
There you go, buddy. I think that's key. you got to keep things simple. Like in big tech, we use the acronym is KISS, KISS. Keep things simple, stupid. A lot of what we do even at Hashflow is we try to build things that are normie friendly, right? And we know there's not a lot of normies here right now. We know it's all natives, but why wouldn't you as a native want to have an easier experience, like clicking your wallet less times, having an easier login, having an onboarding journey that's just very self-explanatory, having a doc center that you can actually understand. I think this is what leads to mass adoption. And so I think in general, it's something that a lot of projects overlook. And I have my own theories as to why they overlook them.
Yeah. Right. And I think one thing that caught my attention as well was that you said you actively trade, right? And we're recording this, I think about 2 hours before that false news of the Bitcoin spot ETF being approved, right? Were you trading that move?
Now, my friend, don't worry.
Sorry?
I said the second I found out that was fake news, again, NFA DYOR, I watched the price point, it peaked, and then I swapped right out. Yeah.
Man, 24/7 on the screen, man.
Yeah, I actually, funny enough, I don't know if we talk about this later, but I have 3 screens up at all times. I have one screen, which is like my work computer where I'm, working and doing emails and, doing things like this. I've got another screen that runs crypto Twitter, right? Because I've got to kind of see what's going on in real time there, or, reply to people when I can. And then I actually have a third screen that runs trading view all day. So yeah, I've got 3 screens on it at all times.
Nice.
Yeah.
Really awesome setup.
Thank you.
Right, and then let's jump right into why join Hashflow, right? Out of so many companies or projects after the Arbitrum. Why?
So candidly, I had a lot of choices. I had a lot of companies reach out, a lot of blue chips, and projects that have massive TVL. And I think again for me, as someone that kind of has the playbook in terms of like what makes for a successful startup, not even in crypto, but in any industry, there's kind of certain things I look for. And so, when I'm choosing a job for myself, I probably do about 10 times the research that I do when I'm investing, which I probably should do on both sides, to be honest. But I'll kind of walk you through it. So basically, it always first starts with me with founders, right? I look at the founders. I look at what is their experience to date. How sophisticated are they at what they're doing? Where did they work before? Because again, take me, for example, as someone that's worked at, media companies, I know how to build media companies. As someone that worked in Hollywood, I know how to leverage, Hollywood and pop culture for awareness. As someone that worked in big tech, I understand how to build and scale tech-based businesses, right? So when I looked at the founders of Hashflow, I'll kind of go through it. So our CEO comes from NASA and German aerospace. And he was a deferred PhD at Stanford, which is by far the best crypto kind of blockchain education you can get. This guy is just incredibly smart, like probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. So that checked that box for me. I was like, okay, great developer. Then I look at our COO, right? So when you think about what a COO does, I mean, they're really trying to kind of build and operate a sustainable business. They understand profits and losses, all of that stuff. Our COO comes from management consulting, which I would argue is the industry that teaches companies how to operate properly, right? And then not only did he come from management consulting, but he also worked with, the JP Morgan Chases of the world, the Goldman Sachs of the world. So I was like, not only does this guy understand how to run a company, but he understands how to tell finance companies how to run themselves, right? So that was like another check for me. Then we have a general counsel in-house, which not every company does. And I think that's actually like a big miss. And actually, funny enough, we have a pretty sizable legal team here. We also have external legal. And you may know who he is. His name is Rassam Boykin, but like you'll see him on places like CNBC. And the reason you see him out there and you don't see a lot of other, general counsels out there is because he is so sophisticated that he understands this stuff. Like a lot of lawyers in the industry come to him. He used to work at Google in the AI department, right? So check. I mean, that's like an incredible, talent to have in-house. And then our CTO, Victor, kind of same thing as Varun, like just an incredible developer. Like I've worked with developers, at so many companies in so many industries for years. And I don't see developers at this level very often. He was at Airbnb, he was at Meta. But I like to describe him as kind of that wonderkin. It's like you meet these guys occasionally where, they're graduating college at 18, they're, VPs at big tech companies at 22, but this guy is like definitely a wonderkin. And then, so that actually checked the box for me. And then as I went even further kind of down the list, our VP of engineering also comes from Meta. Like most of our dev team comes from places like, Twitter and Meta. We have an in-house finance guy from Genesis, right? My team that I've now built out is folks from places like, Amazon and other big tech companies as well. And so I always joke, like, follow the talent, but people that have worked at these types of companies, it's not to say that you have to have worked at these companies, but again, they understand business, they understand scaling, they understand P&L. So again, we are so early right now that if you think like 10 years from now, who's more likely to make it? I do often look towards this type of talent as kind of a signal and indicator. So that was a big one. And I think that also leans into, again, like when you have the right talent in the team, and I'll talk about this in the thread later that I put out, like that is usually also an indicator of who is more likely to gain mass adoption. Folks that don't have this talent, they can go hire that talent. They can go, in typically Web 2 and traditional startups, what happens is you have a board of directors, and usually the board says, all right, like, we get that you're the CEO and the founder, but like, you don't really have this experience. We're going to bring in an operational CEO, or we're going to bring in an operational COO. And so a lot of times what you'll see is companies founded by folks that don't have this experience, the board will bring these people in for them. But what I would call out in crypto, which is very non-traditional, is a lot of these companies do not have boards, meaning there is not someone putting that pressure on you. And so then at that point, it really falls on the founders to then go and decide to make these hires. I'll give you a great example. So like Axelar, who I do like those guys quite a bit. Like, they've been making some very heavy hitting, Web 2 type hires. Like their recruiter reached out to me, right? For example, but like, that's a great example of, you may have a founder or founders that don't have this experience, but they're smart enough to surround themselves with these people, right? And listen to them, because they know that that's what's going to help them drive, success and mass adoption and all these things, right? So there's that. And then the other one on the founder side is values. So for me, again, people always joke like everyone's here to make a bag. I'm really not here to make a bag at all. Like I've already done, quite well in life. I'm very happy with my life. I don't need to be a trillionaire to be happy in this world. And so I really do look at this industry for me as a little bit of like a doing good opportunity, right? Like, can I make people's lives better? Can I help dissolve the old system that is not inclusive? Like those are the reasons I'm really here, right? So I think, again, when I met the founders here, one, they're just some of the nicest, highest quality humans I've met in my career. Two, they just care. I mean, these guys care about community. They care about crypto and Web3. They're really not here to just like make it rich and call it a day, right? So that value prop thing was really important for me. And then other things I look at, again, when I'm talking talent, the quality of the developers, again, the developers here are really best in class. Another thing I look at is investors, right? I look at who invested. And the biggest difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is in Web 2, you usually just go, did Andreessen invest, right? And I've met Mark a couple of times. He is incredible. He's a wonderful investor and a very smart person, right? But I think in crypto, you have to understand that a lot of these traditional VCs were actually pretty late to the game, right? And understandably so. Like this world is very complicated. And so in crypto, I actually tend to look more towards the native VCs being folks like Dragonfly, Pantera, Paradigm, et cetera. And so I looked at who our investors were, and it was incredible. It was like we had pretty much all the like blue chip investors. Dragonfly is our largest investor. Electric, which is former Dragonfly, is also an investor. And then the other thing that was a really big bullish signal for me was market makers. So we have, GSR and Wintermute and all these big market makers. Actually, Coinbase Ventures is also an investor of ours, funny enough. But they're all investors, which means they're also incentivized to market make for us. Like they want to make Hashflow successful, right? So they're going to provide liquidity and they're going to provide pairs. So that was another big like bullish signal for me. Another thing I look at is kind of roadmap and product. I think, good startups have to pivot. They just do, right? If you're so focused on a singular vision and the world around you changes or the industry changes, again, like if you don't change with it, you're not going to make it. Like I've seen this over and over again. It's called a founder dilemma, where they get so stuck in their own vision that they don't understand. And so I did walk through kind of the both the public and private roadmap with the Hashflow founders. And funny enough, it was like very aligned with a lot of the things that I was going to suggest. And you and I can talk about some of that stuff. But again, like when I look at where the company's going and where the product is going and new products that are being developed, I was like, this feels very good to me. So I would say those are probably some of the biggest things. And then the funny one, the last one that kind of sealed the deal for me was, I wasn't just talking to companies, I was also talking to VCs. And so I was talking to Dragonfly, who's one of my favorite crypto native VCs. And they basically said to me, like, the whole portfolio is open. Like, let us know who you want to talk to, which was like very, very kind of them. And I said to them, I said, it's okay. I don't need to talk to 100 companies. Like, here's what I'm looking for. And I gave them all my boxes. And I said, who checks this box or who checks these boxes? And they kind of laughed and they said, there's like 3 companies in the industry that check these boxes. And I go, yep, I'm familiar. And I said, who's box number 1? Like, what's your first pick? And they're like, well, based on everything you're saying, like, we think Hashflow would be the best home for you. And then I kind of smiled at them and they said, what? And I said, well, that's good because they're one of the top 3 that I'm considering right now. And so that was kind of what finally sealed the deal for me. And then here I am. And then even at Hashflow, I mean, yeah, they're so smart. I mean, I was their first CMO, which it's been incredible. I love working here. But then, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, they were like, what do you think about being both our CMO and chief strategy officer? And I was like, I love that idea. And they told me, all the rationale and things like that. And so these guys, they just get it. They understand it, So, yeah.
Awesome, man. Hashflow is basically made up of all these smart people from big tech. And then you kind of got in after knowing these people and your investor friends, right?
Yep.
Moving to where all the smart money is.
Yeah. And like, listen, I'm a degen, I'm a degen, right? And so I think the other thing that was so funny was when I was, talking to these guys, I would ask them questions like, hey, I'm curious, like, do you trade? What tokens do you like? Are you into NFTs? And at most companies, what I found in crypto, funny enough, is like, while folks are builders and building these things, they're not degens. Like, they're not into this stuff. Like, they don't have NFTs. They don't, actively trade, things like that. And for me, I'm kind of like, well, if we're building the best decks on the planet, like, you guys better actually be traders. And then what was cool was most of the folks that I talked to were like, yeah, let me show you my NFT collection, or yeah, let me show you my portfolio. And I was like, oh my God, you're like really like degens, you're actual degens. And so that was also kind of exciting for me because I was like, all right, I found my people,
The Kanpai Pandas gang.
Oh man, that one, again, NFA DYOR, but like I got my Panda for I think 300. It peaked at like 3,000. It's still holding strong. I think at like 1,400. But yeah, I'll tell you, like I'm talking more kind of crypto products and services, but in the NFT space, I mean, there's a couple founders that have very good experience. So Ice Bags at Pandas, like he's built businesses before. Luca, I knew of because he used to work at Ring, which was an Amazon company. He's built businesses. The one that I think everyone sleeps on right now is Forgotten Runes. Like, those guys come from Disney, like they get it. So I think again that MO of kind of like, what do I look for in founders applies to kind of every sector. And so, so far my Panda's done quite well.
Nice. No, and I was about to ask when you asking about whether your colleagues trade, right? And if they didn't, I was about to ask like, so what, are you gonna give them a trading masterclass or something to force them to trade?
Well, actually, it's funny. So again, I'm very, like a lot of times in marketing, for example, I have to hire folks in Web 2. I try to hire from the community, to be honest, like as much as I can, I really do. But if I'm looking for a very, very, very technical, like marketing skill set, a lot of times the place you're going to get that is like big tech marketing, because again, you learn it on the job through experience, or there's training course. Like at Amazon, we had training courses all the time. And so when I hire these normies, I'm like, I got to turn them into degens. And so funny enough, I have a whole kind of master class that I teach all of them. It's probably like 75% self-learning, 25%, me teaching them. But every week I do an hour session where I literally teach them. So like this week, for example, I'm teaching them about aggregators. And what I do is I screen share and I explain aggregators to them. I use a lot of analogies. Then I literally go make a swap on each of them. I show them what's happening on the screen. Then I, compare them all with each other so they can understand, because I think it's just really important to understand this stuff. And then the other thing that we do at Hashflow, which I really appreciate, is we give all of our new hires some tokens to play with, right? Like, hey, here's some USDC. Go start using Hashflow. Go start playing Hashverse. Go make some swaps on competitors and see the difference. Because I think, again, like, you've got to use these things to really understand them, especially if you're going to be the one answering questions or even like speaking on a podcast like this. Like if I haven't already used 25 other dexes, how can I really talk intelligently about my own? I don't think you can.
Man, that's really nice. I like how you conduct your weekly classes of turning them to crypto degens.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Love it, man. And then let's move on a bit now. You guys recently launched the Hashverse, right, on Hashflow. So how does Hashverse come into play in the DEX, man? So what is Hashverse?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I'll give you kind of more of the normie answer. So the best way to think about Hashverse is it's really like a gamified layer on top of a DEX, right? And so, again, I came from Arbitrum. There's a NFT community called Treasure, which is kind of a Web3 gaming community. But a lot of those games are actually GameFi, right? Like gamified finance. And again, like as someone that just really believes in community, I went and bought all those NFTs, joined those communities. I still play a lot of those games. I love like Realm is a really cool one that I play a lot still. But basically, with the team, we had talked about this and we said, we know a lot of people in this space love gaming. I love gaming. I've been playing, Atari since I was a kid. I have, my Switch actually right next to me right now. But we were like, if we can add kind of a game element to this, not only is that more fun, but maybe it also attracts, new daily active users and new traders and new trades and all these things, right? So we actually partnered, funny enough, with a company that I had worked with for years called Superconductor. These are the guys that did, the Avengers and Captain America and the Fast and the Furious franchise, all of which I've kind of touched in some way in my career. And so we worked with them to kind of build like the backstory and the lore and all of this stuff. And then when I got to Hashflow, this had already been in development for a while. We started to build the GameFi platform. And then what was great was because I had played let's call it 15 other GameFi platforms for a year, I kind of already in my head knew like, here are some of my favorite elements of them. Here are things I don't like, here's how we can create a more simplified onboarding experience, all these things. And so we did that. And then the other thing that I did was, we built our own focus group, which we still use. There's like a private channel on Discord. There's a token in all their wallets. But we actually had them play, different versions of the game as it was being developed and give us feedback. And then I would say like 95% of that feedback actually got integrated. And the alpha there is that some of these folks are the developers of other GameFi games. And some of these folks are players of those GameFi games for 2 years, right? So again, like we really tried to lean into kind of the experts to help us kind of up-level ourselves. And so with Hashverse, like the way to think about it, because there's a lot of different elements that were built in, some of which were built in after I got here, actually, just based on my own experience. But for example, like it's free, right? Anyone can mint. And that was a big thing for me because I think Web3 should be inclusive. So anyone can join. We just crossed actually 5,000 mints, which I'm like, that's incredible in a bear market to do 5,000 mints in a couple of weeks.
Congrats,
but it starts, thank you. But yeah, it starts with minting a character. And then the second component is that community component. So if you have certain NFTs in your wallet of other communities that you're already a part of, you can then join those allegiances. You can join those teams, right? Which I'll talk about in a second. Then in single player mode, there's story quests, right? So if you love reading comic books, if you love sci-fi, adventure, all that, there are all these stories that you can read and answer questions and win XP. And that's a lot of the stuff that we developed with those Marvel guys. So that's just entertainment. Like that's like come here and just entertain yourself, like read something fun, right? Then we have this thing called Daily Dexer, which I don't think people fully understand, but this is like part of my passion project against this. But I said to the guys, I said, hey, there's so many folks out there that are like new to trading, not just crypto, but like stock trading. There's so many folks that like are trading that don't know what they're doing. There's so many folks that want to like learn how to trade well, but don't know who to trust. And so we built this thing called Daily Dexter where there are these quests, and it starts really small. It's like learn DeFi terms, learn TradFi terms, learn kind of macro things. And then over time, that's going to get very, very micro. So you'll learn like candlesticks and patterns and technical analysis and all that kind of stuff. But really the goal there was like, how do we just help up level the space? How do we help people that want to do this stuff, like learn how to do it intelligently so that they can become successful traders? And then again, like pay it forward. Maybe they then go teach their friends or help their friends on board. So that I look at as like an educational platform. And then we have this other thing called trade streaks, where if you make a trade on Hashflow each day, it counts towards your trade streak. And then there's different levels. I think it's like 5 days, 10 days. There's actually an Easter egg at 14 that I think people discovered, 15 days, et cetera, where there's bonuses, where you get bonus XP for maintaining those streaks. So that's really cool. And then on the other side of Hashflow is what we call like the battle experience. And this is more of the team-based competition, where what you do is you join these battle royales, typically through a quest in single player mode. And then again, you're part of a team tied to an NFT that you have, or maybe you go out and buy one of those NFTs because you want to be on that team, right? Which we've seen a couple of these collections just go parabolic on the floor, which has been really awesome for them. And then what happens is you're in a trading competition. We started with one pair to kind of make it easy. We then, up level to I think 3 in battle 1. And then really what you're doing is you're making swaps, and you only have to have, I think it's like 25 USDC to join. But if you want to trade higher amounts, you can. And then basically what you're doing is you're spending a number of days trading and trying to out trade other people, and maybe using some of what you learned in Daily Dexter to kind of up level yourself. And then what happens is there's a leaderboard, right? And so different allegiances or teams, rise to the top of the leaderboard. And if you're a member of one of the winning teams, you might get some XP, you might get some HFT rewards. But then going back to single player, those XPs and scores also factor into single player. And so just by doing these things every day, you can earn like real HFT rewards. We're giving out 1 million HFT tokens just in season 1, right? And there's tons of battles. And then the other thing is with the battles, like just for showing up, you get rewarded, right? So you get 250 XP in every battle. If you do 10 battles, that's 2,500 XP. You're going to be higher up on the leaderboard, which means your HFT rewards might be higher, right? So I really believe in this notion of like giving back to the community, DAO governance, all these things. And so the whole idea here was like, let's help people. Let's create a fun experience on top of that. Let's let people earn HFT rewards, and then let's let them have more, governance power over the protocol and actually decide the vision of the company. So far so good. We've had, I think, like 800 active battle participants. We've continued to see more folks join. So it's been really great. Yeah.
Nice. Right, so as I've seen some of the more popular allegiances, the Space Donkeys and the Blockmates, right?
These Blockmates, Realm, Layer 3 actually like brought in a ton of players, so those guys are doing well. But yeah, and actually, fun fact, a little alpha, we have 4 new allegiances coming. 2 are GameFi projects. One is a media company, and then one is a blockchain. So those will be new allegiances, and actually you can swap allegiances once per season. So once those launch, you might see some players jump into those. You might see new players, join that are parts of those communities. But I think this like community approach is pretty powerful. Yeah.
Nice. So, and you kind of converted your little master class into the daily quest, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
That was
So
my,
people,
I was like, let's, because again, I can't teach, master classes online every day, but like I can integrate learnings into Daily Dexter and then spread that knowledge to other people and help them, So yeah.
nice. Learn to earn.
Learn to earn, my friend. Yeah.
Right, nice. And I think we've pretty much covered most of this stuff, right, that we want to talk about today.
Sure.
But one more question, right? Still within the topic of the crypto. So within the crypto space, what is one thing that you're the most excited about right now?
I would say there's kind of 2 things, and then I'll nod back to kind of like where Hashflow is going. So what am I most excited about right now? Probably APAC. So when I got to Hashflow, I said to them, my gut is telling me APAC is the future. Like I could feel it in my bones. And they're like, why do you feel that? And I'm like, I'll give you some things that I'm seeing, but like, I feel this. And this was like 6 or 7 months ago. Right. And then I have Amazon data scientists on retainer here. Again, we have our own data, we have third-party data. And so what I've seen over the past probably 4 months is just like data that continues to prove that my assumption was correct, right? And we joke at Amazon, we have this thing called is often right. You had to prove that you're often right to work at the company. And so I look at this as like, it's probably honestly just all the varied experiences I've had and things like that I'm looking at and connecting the dots to. But I'm really excited about APAC. I mean, I think, Japan gets it, Korea gets it, Singapore gets it. And so, again, while the US is maybe creating, fear and distrust, I think APAC sees the opportunity. And I think why I'm excited about that is, one, what does that mean? It means those countries are going to generate revenue for their countries, right? That's great for those countries. Two, it's going to create jobs, right? A lot of companies that are based in the US are offshoring, right? And what does that mean? It means maybe they're more open to hiring people in APAC versus the US, right? And so when you look at Silicon Valley and the power of Silicon Valley, both in the US and also the world, there is definitely a part of me that thinks like Web3 Silicon Valley is going to be in Asia. And so you and I were joking about this, but I was like, if I didn't have a family right now and I didn't own a house, I probably would be living in Asia right now. But I'm very excited about Asia, probably more than anything in crypto. And just to kind of go back to Hashflow for a second, I mean, we've been building. And so I can't give you names of things that we're building, but I will tell you like some things. So one is you're going to be able to swap any pair you want. You're going to be able to get better prices on everything you want. You're going to have the liquidity on everything you want. And then we did publicly announce we're creating an order book. So a lot of traders still trade on centralized exchanges, which I don't love because of the self-custody notion of DEXs. But again, I understand why they want to use an order book. It's faster. It's oftentimes a better trading experience, similar to the stock exchange. So we are building an order book. And then the last thing that I'll say is like, this goes back to kind of my Amazon mentality. Like we want to be your decentralized home. We want to be a singular destination for you to do any kind of decentralized DeFi related activity you could ever think of. And so I won't tell you what that means, but what I will say is come 2024, I think that vision will become a reality. And even for me as a trader, I'm really excited to be able to go to a single place and do everything I want to do in one place. So yeah.
Yeah, man, super excited. So we're gonna tweak our brains a little bit here and there. Think about what Andrew just said, right? Do everything, anything on Hashflow.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. I mark my words, it's gonna happen. Yeah.
Awesome. Super looking forward to it. And thank you so much, Andrew, for all the sharings. Now I want to get to know a little bit more about you and your little bit of schedule, right? So could you run us through a day in the life of Andrew Saunders?
Oh my gosh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I wake up very early. I wake up around probably about 5 a.m. Pacific time. The first thing I typically do is I read the news. So I created I'm a little bit of a hacker myself. Like I like to hack things, products, media companies, things like that. So I built a system years ago that lets me scan probably about 5,000 to 10,000 articles a day. So the first thing I do is I wake up, I scroll through all of them, I bookmark the ones I'm going to read, and then I read them, right? So I think knowledge is powerful. So the first thing I do every day is I read a lot. I think last year Pocket said I read 1 million articles, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So that's the first thing I do. Then the second thing I do is I open up CT, and I have all these custom lists, right? So I have a list of Hashflow, its employees, its investors, things like that. I have another list for, funny enough, people like you that I think are smart. And I first scroll through those lists. I see, I guess this is kind of news 2.0. I see what are people talking about? Is there anything that a lot of people are talking about? So think like narratives. Then I look at who's reacted to posts, so that I can go and reply to all of them or like their tweets. If I see a good thread from someone like yourself, I might retweet it if I think it can, help up level, our traders and things like that and make them smarter and more sophisticated. So CT is kind of my second thing every day. Then I have a lot of meetings. I would say they're usually either kind of strategy meetings, where I'm meeting with like our COO and our data team. Sometimes they are, data related meetings specifically. It might be with a data partner or again, my Amazon data scientist, but I'm very big on, the science side of art. Like I think most marketing is art. I definitely take an art plus science approach. And I would say I'm probably 60% science, 40% art. So a lot of data meetings. Then I tend to have a decent amount of kind of content meetings, creative meetings. So it could be reviewing campaigns or reviewing, content that's going to be going out, making sure it's degen, making sure it's relevant to what's happening that day or to the community. Also, we are working with lots and lots of third-party companies. So a lot of times I've got to reply to, messages on Telegram, or I've got to review something that came in through a partner. So there's a lot of that throughout the day. And then community. I have a lot of meetings around community, like, what's the community sentiment today? Are there any, issues on Discord we need to resolve? Is there anything nice we can do for the community today? Or what are the plans for the community over the next week or so? But community is definitely a part of my day every day. And then that's, most of my day. And then at the end of the day, gosh, I probably work till like 7 or 8. And I'm on Twitter 24/7. But then I typically start my second job. So I'm a dad. So, setting the dinner table, playing with my son, maybe watching a little TV with him, bath time I do every day myself, bedtime, I do with my wife. And then I'm also a caretaker. I caretake for some family members. So sometimes I have to deal with, good old emails from the government or, emails from care centers or things like that. So, so that's pretty much it. And then I actually, I do prioritize sleep quite a bit. I should get more into meditation too, but I don't go to sleep very late. I usually go to sleep around maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then, I'm up at 5 a.m. the next day and it all over again. And then on the weekends, kind of similar. Like I tend to work in the mornings. I do work probably 7 days a week. I'm still on Twitter all day, but I do try to balance it a little bit and spend, time with the family and friends and things like that. So yeah, that's my day.
Awesome. When you mentioned that you're gonna start your second job at 7 p.m., I thought you were
Yeah.
gonna say like become a trader by then or something.
No, I mean, to your point, like I've got TradingView open every day from, 5 a.m. until,
Right.
7. And then I've got, actually, this is a good tip. So I have on my phone, I have TradingView, I have CoinMarketCap, I have CoinGecko, but I have all kinds of alerts. So it's not uncommon that at 8 o'clock at night, I get an alert on my phone and I've got to go make a quick swap. So I think that's how I stay on the charts 24/7, but also it's how I, balance my life a little bit. Yeah.
Right. And I think the first thing you mentioned, right, where you said you scan like thousands of articles first thing in the morning.
Yep.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, so I'll give you a tip. So what I do, it's not that hard, but I use an RSS reader. But you have what's called aggregate RSS readers, and then I aggregate different sources into different categories. So for example, I have one called crypto where it brings in, Decrypt and Blockworks and CoinDesk and things like that. But I also have, the ones in Mandarin in Asia and, things like that. So I think that's something I do. I set up Google alerts. So I have different alerts coming into my inbox every day. And then I might have a different category called big tech, right? And maybe in big tech, it's, TechCrunch and Verge and stuff like that, because I do think, and then I have another section called finance, right? Big, TradFi stuff. But I think you have to, as a trader, not just know what's happening in crypto, but you've got to understand the macro, right? Because when I see, commodities are doing this, or I see bonds are doing that, or I see, a country is now at war. I mean, that stuff all has an impact, not just on, traditional financial markets, but also on the crypto financial markets, right? So you got to stay on top of that stuff. And then I think, again, there's some good native news sources on Twitter as well that I set like alerts up for as well. Yep.
Awesome. And so far, all I've been hearing is work, work, work. So my next question to you would then be, what are some of your hobbies, man? Do you have time for hobbies?
Oh, good question. To be totally honest with you, I don't have a ton of time for hobbies. I try to always work in things that I'm passionate about. So crypto is a hobby. I do buy NFTs and I do research projects and stuff. And I enjoy doing that. I like to learn. I've always liked to learn. Other than that, I make music. So I've got a lot of musical instruments. I do like video games, so I've got a Switch because I travel a lot. So I play a lot of Japanese fighting games from like Arxis. I like some of the sports games. I like some of the puzzle games. I'm actually not a big like fighting game guy. I think only because I've got like a little kid out here, so I don't want him to see guns and stuff like that every day. But yeah, I'm definitely a gamer. I love pinball. I love going to like old arcades and playing pinball. And I love to bike. I'm actually like, again, as someone that worked in climate years ago, if you ever wondered why celebrities all drive Priuses, you're talking to one of the reasons. But I bike a lot, so I actually only have one car for my family. My wife uses it most of the time, so I bike to all my meetings. I like to just bike around too. Good way to clear your head. And I do like podcasts. I like listening to podcasts and learning. So yeah, that's what I do with my very limited free time.
Nice, but that's really nice, man. Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Right, and let's wrap things up soon, right? It's been a bit over an hour now. Let's
Sure.
finish off with our final two questions, with the first one being, what is your biggest takeaway from being in crypto?
Yeah, I thought about this one for a little bit because there's a lot of ways you can approach it, and I think I'm going to go macro. So my biggest takeaway from being in crypto is the future is bright. And what I mean by that is, listen, I'm in my 40s, right? I have a lot of friends that are intellectually curious and they're into crypto, but that's because like people gravitate towards people like themselves, right? It just happens. What I find in crypto with all these anons, so like a lot of these big name anons that you're friends with, they've doxed themselves to me. I know their names, I know where they live. I'm very pro anon. I'm very supportive and protected of people's anonymous choice, right? I think it's a choice that everybody has, and I think as both a company and a person, you need to respect it. And so what I'm shocked by is how many times I get on a Google Hangout with someone, they dox themselves, and I find out they're like 22 years old. And what that says to me is, I'm 40, right? And I'm in this industry and I'm trying to move it forward. But like, there is an army of 22 to 25-year-olds that get it, that understand it, that see the possibility and potential. And what's going to happen, and this, is the boomers are going to age out. They're going to leave business. Millennials like myself are going to move up. Gen Z is going to move up. Gen Alpha is going to move up. And so I can't help but say to myself, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like the future is really, really bright. And so I think that's my biggest takeaway from being in crypto. Yeah.
Awesome. That's really nice, man. And then the final question would then be, what are your 3 guest nominations for me to come on the podcast in future?
Yes, I thought about this one quite a bit too, right? Because got a lot on CT. So there's kind of 3. So, and I picked them for different reasons, which I'll explain. So I don't know if these guys have been on yet, but my first pick is Blockmates. And you've got, over at Blockmates, you've got Grant, you've got Dan, and then you've also got Jedi. And I would say, like, if you don't follow Jedi, follow Jedi. Jedi is, I'm not going to dox him, but like he's a very smart, sophisticated trader. Like myself, he has a lot of experience both in life and business, but like that guy is extremely smart. And so the reason I picked Blockmates is research. I think research is like the cornerstone to everything. And those guys do great research. They've got this new NFT coming out called LARP, Live Action Research Pass. But I think like having a guest that understands how to do good research is something that can benefit everyone, right? Like, so I talk to those guys every week, but I'm always asking them like, any new tools you found, or, how do you know which research is accurate versus, BS? Those guys really understand research. So I would say Blockmates is a good one.
Nice. Andrew, sorry, just to cut you off there. I really appreciate it and totally agree with all the nice things you said about them. But I actually had all of them on already separately, like individually, right? And it was, in fact, like with Grant, Jedi, and Dan in that sequence. And the episode with Dan was, in fact, released during the week of Token 2049.
Well, so I'm not surprised that you are on the like GigaBrains. All right, so check that one off the list. The next one is a little non-traditional. So there's a CEO named Big Noodle, and the CMO is Lambo. And they're part of an NFT community called Lost Donkeys, which is in the Hashverse. The reason I recommend them as a guest is these guys really understand community. I would say in the entire Arbitrum ecosystem, when I got there, like Arbitrum did not really have a community. TreasureDAO had a community. And so I joined TreasureDAO and I was like, let's turn these people into Treasure community and Arbitrum community, which definitely happened. But I would say of all the projects at Arbitrum, like these guys understand community probably better than anyone. So I think get them on, talk community, understand how they approach community, understand how they engage community, understand how they build community. But like these guys really understand community like better than a lot of blockchains do, which is still kind of shocking to me. So I would definitely bring them on for sure.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then, yep. And then the last recommendation that I have is a little outside the box. But there are definitely folks like me that come from big tech that work in this industry. And I do think that a lot of those folks really look at this industry differently than a lot of, folks that natively grew up in it do, And so I don't know if you're familiar with Nader David, but he leads DevRel at Aave, and we've been friends for a long time. We both worked at Amazon together. He is probably the best head of DevRel in the entire industry, in my opinion. And I think it's interesting because, again, what he's doing is he's servicing a much more technical audience, right? So he also like understands this stuff very, very well. But I think like he would be a great guest to understand kind of what I would call like the bridge between, CT and developer, and what are developers focused on? What does he find interesting? How does he evaluate projects? Because I have a feeling his answers would be very different than most other guests. But he is definitely a gigabrain. And even though I think a lot of stuff that he posts on CT can be, quite technical because that's who his audience is, he is like a must follow in my opinion, for sure.
Awesome. It will be an interesting conversation for sure. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I might need your help to send me the link profile
I got
for
you,
those
my
guys.
boy. Got you. I take care of my friends. Of course, I'll introduce you to them. I'm happy to.
Right, and I think that is all for today, right? That's everything that we had. Thank you so much, Andrew, for taking the time to come on. I will definitely be linking Andrew's link down below as well as all of Hashflow's. So do check them out. And thank you for the audience for tuning in to this episode, and we will see you in the next episode.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, my friend. I've known you obviously for a while. I think you're a great guy and also a gigabrain. And so I appreciate you doing what you're doing and, helping to move the space forward. And then also I would just call out, if anyone's afraid to click links, I don't click links. The links in my bio are all verified and safe. So you can also just go link in bio if that appeals to you.
That brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Before you go, do remember to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button so you never miss a thing. Comment down below what you liked about this episode, who you would like me to interview next, or any topics that you want to learn more about. Until next time, this is Moose moving out.